Hi, this is Mary McCaslin, and you're listening to Retrospectives with John Broughton on KC Radio, 97.7 FM.
I saw an old friend the other day in San Francisco by the bay.
What would be your earliest musical memory when you first felt music starting to take a part of your life there?
My earliest musical memory?
Yeah.
Gosh, I suppose hearing Les Paul and Mary Ford doing Via con Dios back in the very late 40s, you know. And I'm sure I heard Ghost Riders in the Sky by Vaughn Monroe back then, because he was the one that had the big hit. Sons of the Pioneers did it before him, but Vaughn Monroe is the one that did Ghost Riders as far as I'm concerned, and certainly in that time period. And then, you know, later on, as I was through childhood, just hearing most of the music my parents listened to was the 1940s swing stuff. And then, you know, hearing early rock and roll and the Everly Brothers and Jimmy Rogers. And the Jimmy Rogers I'm talking about is not the Mississippi Blue Yodeler. It's the guy that did Honeycomb and Kisses Sweeter Than Wine, you know. And then hearing Marty Robbins doing El Paso. That was the first time I'd really heard him that I know of, or that I remember. And after that, Big Iron, and those songs just changed my life. And then I started listening to country music pretty much after that instead of the rock and roll stations, because they played Marty Robbins more, even though those hits were crossover hits, so they were being heard on the big rock stations as well. And then from there, I just started listening to country music and rock. I'd listen for a month or so to the country music station and switch over and listen to the rock and roll station, you know, all through high school. And then I got interested in folk music in probably about my junior year. And I bought a guitar at the end of my sophomore year and started playing a little bit, but then I thought I was going to be a country singer, and then when I started hearing folk music, hearing Joan Baez and Peter, Paul, and Mary, I realized I wanted to do something more along that line. So that was, you know, the basis of what I started, you know, why I'm here today, I guess.
So was there a particular point where music started to become a serious career option for you when you first felt that?
Yeah, when I was 14, even before I got a guitar, I'd made up my mind I wanted to be a singer. And usually people don't decide at that young of an age. I just happened to, you know, and I've certainly done many other things along the way to pay the bills, you know, when I couldn't get work playing music. But, I mean, I always had it in my mind that that's what I was going to do.
What about songwriters? Who were some of the early songwriters that inspired you to want to write yourself?
Probably Joni Mitchell, I would imagine, because she was the first woman that I ever heard really writing songs, and Marty Robbins. You know, all those Western ballads. I don't know if you're familiar with them or not, but you know, those two probably influenced me as a songwriter early on more than anyone else I can think of.
Now, you play guitar and banjo.
That's correct.
Does being proficient at one in some way influence the way you play the other, and vice versa?
Well, I started playing guitar first. I didn't pick up the banjo until I was 21. And the kind of banjo I play, the style I play, is called claw hammer or frailing. I don't play bluegrass at all. And I just met some people who played that style of banjo, and I really liked it. And then I started doing kind of unusual songs on the banjo. I don't do a lot of the traditional tunes that everyone else does. I don't know if you ever heard a group called the Buffalo Springfield or not.
Oh, yes, of course, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, they had an album called Buffalo Springfield Again, and they did a song called Bluebird on it. And at the end of the song, it was a rock song. It was a great song in any capacity. But at the end of the song, it stopped, and Stephen Stills does a little guitar lick, and then it comes back in, and there's a claw hammer or frailing banjo being played, and Stephen Stills is playing an acoustic guitar, country style, and it's just great. It's real folky, and that gave me the idea to do some of the odd rock songs that I've done on the banjo. And I thought, well, you know, these songs can be reworked. So that was the thing that gave me the idea to do that.
We heard so much down here about the folk scene that emerged out of New York in the 60s. What about across the other side of the country where you were on the West Coast? Was it a strong folk scene as well?
Yeah, there was. In the 60s, of course, it was Greenwich Village, and that was where Bob Dylan and all those people came, first made any notoriety, or received any notoriety, I should say. And it's interesting because people always think of California as leading the way, and everybody says, "Oh, I want to do it just like in California." And with some exceptions, most of the modern innovations, or most innovations at all, in this country come from the East Coast or even the Midwest. I don't think they necessarily start in California. They might get very popular. So out here in California, I think the folk scene started a little bit later than out in the West, generally, a little bit later than back east. But, I grew up in Southern California, and there were a lot of coffee houses, and coffee houses now mean places just where people sit around and drink coffee. But back in the 60s, they then became folk clubs, but they were basically places, they called them coffee houses originally, and they were based on the old coffee houses where people sat around and thought deep thoughts, I guess. I don't know. But then they became regular little clubs. There were a lot of them. And there was a scene in L.A., and then it eventually changed to the folk rock scene, with the not with the Eagles, but the Byrds and people like that.
Was it difficult? Were there any difficulties in gaining recognition as a folk-orientated act at a time when the main folk boom, I guess, of the 60s had more or less passed?
Was it for me to gain recognition? Well, no, I was doing okay. I never made it big. There was enough. See, during the late 60s, because of people like Bob Dylan and Joni Mitchell, it became the age of the singer-songwriter, and that age has never completely faded. There was a period of time during the 80s, during the maybe late 70s and early 80s, early to mid 80s, when the folk scene in general kind of died all over the United States, and then it kind of went into a resurgence in the, I'd say close to the late 80s. It started up again, and now, of course, it's very big, and here we are in the late 90s, and there's people like Dar Williams and Greg Brown, and I can't think who else right now, that are very big, and there are a lot. Now there's just thousands of singer-songwriters, and there's all these little tiny venues that you can make $50 or $100, and everybody, this is the age of the independent recording. People are putting out their own product, where back when I was recording, very few people did that. If you couldn't get with a label, you just didn't record. People just didn't have the wherewithal or the ability somehow to put out their own recording. But now they can, and so there's lots more. Everybody that picks up a guitar and strings a few words together, somehow is a singer-songwriter, and they put out CDs, and some of them are really good, and some of them aren't.
Yeah, it has turned around in favour of the artist, hasn't it, in recent years?
It's what?
It's turned around in favour of the artist in recent years, hasn't it?
Well, to a degree, yeah, because you can put out your own product, but that doesn't necessarily mean you can get it distributed. Mostly you carry it and sell it when you're traveling and playing, and you try to get it to the radio stations for airplay and stuff like that. But, I don't know. There's a lot of artists that are wonderful and who should be on the bigger labels, and there's some of them that I think will fade, go by the wayside. It's sad to say, but I just think that it's a process. A lot of people just have to do it. A lot of times it works for them. A lot of times it doesn't.
Now, the time you spent working in a duo with Jim, what would be some of the things that you learned during that time that, in terms of recording and performing, that you still take with you today?
The things I learned when I was performing with Jim?
Yeah. In terms of recording and performing.
Well, I don't know. I don't know that I could say any particular thing that I've learned about recording. I suppose the thing with recording, he and I had a complete different way of recording. He took a lot longer to record. He liked to record later at night, and it was more of a party atmosphere. Me, I wanted to record during the day and be very business-like about it, and I'm still that way. I've always been that way. So I can't say that I learned any particular things through recording with Jim. We did one duet album called The Bramble and the Rose, and I played on a lot of his recordings and sang on them. He sang and played on some of mine, but we only really did the one duet album, which is going to be reissued sometime, I think, after the first of the year.
Oh, good.
And as far as performing, I don't know. I don't know how much I learned had anything to do with Jim particularly. You learn something every time you go on stage, or every time you get in the studio. You learn how to better, utilize the time you have, or maybe you sing a song a little bit better one time than another time. You try to remember the time you sang it really well and do it again. Maybe you might figure out that the order you're performing the songs doesn't work as well as if you change them around, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily think it had much to do with anything I learned really had much to do with Jim as such, And I don't know. I've been doing this a long time. I mean, I'm 52 years old, and I started performing my first professional gig. I was 18. That's a long time, and I've learned a lot over the years, and I still enjoy it. I mean, I would do it more if I could. If there was I don't have an agent right now, so it's very. Some people are really good at booking themselves. It's hard for me to do that. I mean, it's Plus, there's so many people out there. A lot of people will just tell me, I've just say, well, we want somebody that's young and up and coming. I had an agency tell me that. We want the young, up and coming people. So what do? You just try to keep doing the best you can do, and try not to feel bad about that. It's just one of those things. But sometime I'd like to come down to Australia, and I have a friend that lives in New Zealand. I know it's not right next door, but it's fairly close, and so sometime I'm hoping to make it down there to play, and because I know you have a folk scene down there, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. We've got a string of wonderful acoustic venues where you'd slot in perfectly.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd like to do that sometime. Isn't there a festival down there?
There is. There's a few festivals. Actually, Port Fairy would be the main folk festival here in Victoria, in our state. And, we have artists coming from all over the world every year for that.
Oh, that's nice. That's great. Are you involved with that?
No, but it's a very popular festival. People come from all over the country for it.
I bet it's just beautiful down there, too.
It's a lovely spot, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you've said you're not a prolific writer yourself. Is that by choice, or...?
No, it is never by choice. If somebody says that, nobody chooses not to write. It's just that I've learned over the years that I may write 1 or 2 songs a year. And if I do, I feel lucky, and I feel real good about myself. It's just one of those things. I don't know. I don't write that often. I've been working. I've got 3 songs that I've been working on, and I've got a couple other new ones that I've written over the last couple of years. And I know Rounder, which owns Philo, that I record for, wants me to do another recording. So it's been a while. I haven't recorded since '93. It's just because I haven't had stuff ready, not because of them. And so I'm definitely due to go in and record again. I don't know. I'd like to be able to write more than I do, but I found that if I try to force myself, it doesn't work. I mean, there are some people who say, okay, I'm going to sit down every day for an hour or 2 hours and write, and that's fine. If they can do it and they have the discipline and they have something to say and it comes out, that's great. But I think a lot of times it doesn't work. You kind of just have to write when it all is ready to come out. And usually when it's really ready to come out, I could be standing next to a train going by and nothing would distract me. I'll sit and write the song. But no, I'm not a prolific writer. I wish I was.
So the writing process hasn't gotten any easier with the passing of time?
That's correct. That is correct. It's interesting. I think most people, if you look at the body of work of any particular writer, most people go through periods of time where they write a lot of songs, and then they don't write for a while, or they write just a few songs. I mean, I really think that's true. I think people like Jackson Browne would say that, I don't know that he's got new songs or not now, I shouldn't say, but I mean, there was a long period of time when he didn't have any new recordings come out, and he had albums out, many albums out, session that were wonderful, and all of the songs are wonderful. And I think probably the most prolific writer I can think of that writes consistently good songs, even though her style changed sufficiently to the point that I couldn't understand what she was doing, is Joni Mitchell.
Yeah.
After she quit doing her folk stuff, and went into the more jazz and the more complex stuff. It really lost me. But she's still writing it. She's still doing it, you know, and I think that's great.
Now, you've done a diverse range of covers of other people's songs over the years.
Mm-hmm.
Do you look for something specific in a song to make it one that you'd want to cover?
No, I just have to like the song. There are lots of songs, and like doing them on banjo. I mean, there's lots of songs I hear out there that I could do on banjo, and I'm just too lazy to sit down and work them up, or I forget about it. I'll say, "Oh, that's a great banjo song," then I forget about it. But no, it's just before I started writing, I started doing Beatles songs, and it was a lot of fun to do them, you know. And I just I kind of joke that they very graciously supplied me with wonderful material before I started writing my own. And just a song that would work for my style, I think, is the main thing, if I really like it. And I don't want to do a song that has been done and done and done and done and done, you know, too. I mean, there's some people, like many people have recorded the song Reason to Believe, for instance, although that's not a rock song. It's a great song, but everybody's done it, you know. And I know that I recorded, there's a CD that's just coming out on Bear Family, which is a German label, and I don't know if they do any new artists, new recordings or not. I think they mostly find recordings of that have been they either reissue things or find things that have never been released. Find, you know, recordings that have never been released, and they are releasing some a CD of some songs I recorded on Capitol back in the mid to late '60s. And one of those songs is Suzanne. Well, I had no recollection of having ever recorded it. I remember singing it on stage a few times, but because it was done and done and done and done, I never seriously thought about it. And I did not remember having recorded it until I heard it.
So
you know?
This release that is coming out, are they all from the one session with Capitol?
No, a few sessions over a couple of years.
Okay. Right. You also took many successful rock songs and gave them your own arrangement. Did you see something in those songs that you felt lent them to such a treatment? I mean, how can you tell that?
Well, it's like things we said today is a real folky sounding song. For instance, "Help" is very folky. In fact, there was some country singer that did it in a real folky style, and that was the idea that I got, and I can't think of his name, and it never got popular. I think what other Beatles songs I did. Well, Blackbird, of course, I knew was a banjo song the first time I heard it, largely based on hearing Bluebird. I thought, well, hey. And even though it's completely different, it's a completely different style of song. You know, I think mainly just if they sounded like they could be done in a folk style, especially if they had a minor chord, that kind of thing. You know, and the same with Motown songs. A lot of those are very melodic. I think most of it is if they're a melodic song.
Yeah. You've never seemed to get too caught up in big arrangements and production sound. Has the simple approach always been the one that you've always wanted to maintain?
Yes, because I'm a guitar player first, and everything, when I go in the studio, everybody has to follow what I play on guitar. The guitar, if you listen to my recordings, by and large, the guitar is right up front. It might be covered up a little bit if I'm just playing rhythm guitar and there's a lead instrument like pedal steel or something like that. But by and large, the guitar is right there, and it's evenly. It's at an even level, sound level, with the other instruments on the recording. So no, that's why, because it's just easier for me to. Plus, I have an album called Sunny California that's fairly arranged, but even there, everything's behind my guitar. You know, and I like it that way, because that way I can reproduce it on stage. If a lot of people will go in, they do these massively arranged and produced recordings, and then they go out on stage and it's just them and the guitar, and it really sounds bereft. It really sounds too stark. Or maybe if they're not a very good guitar player and they're just playing rhythm and there's all this other stuff on the recording, to me it just doesn't work. So
now,
I wanted it to be able to be something I could reproduce on stage.
You had a lengthy break from recording up until the Broken Promises album. Were you still actively writing and performing during that time?
Some. I quit for about a year, and I think a lot of people think I quit for 10 years, and I didn't quit for 10 years. I quit from about 1987 to 89, I'd say, or maybe late 87 to 89. I don't know how much. I played a little bit. I mean, I performed here and there, but as far as recording, I didn't. My last recording was in 1980, and that was an album called A Life and Time on Flying Fish, and I went through in 89, I started writing again. Mm-hmm. And I wrote like 6 songs in about a year and a half, which is a lot for me. In fact, let me see, I wrote 6 songs, probably during that time period, and it was a lot for me to write. And so I knew I was ready to record again. So then I connected up with what happened was Rounder had taken over Philo, because Philo went out of business, and Rounder bought Philo, and then they started reissuing things on CD. And one of the first things that happened was people kept asking me if I had CDs out, or if I would ever could get my stuff reissued. And I said, I don't know. And I had contacted Rounder about the possibility of putting out this LP that was called The Best Of, which was one of the last recordings I did. Well, I didn't. It was selected from my recordings on Philo, and it was when Rounder first started. They put this album out, and I had no say in it, and I would, it was okay, and I wrote a postcard to Ken Irwin from Rounder saying, gee, why don't, I'm consistently being asked for CDs. Is there a way that maybe you guys could reissue that album on a CD, because it probably wouldn't cost very much, and it would be something, and I think it would probably sell for you, and it would sell for me. And I was in the Boston area, which is where Rounder is, and I wrote the postcard, stuck it in the mail, and that very evening I was playing at a club called Passim, and I came out of the dressing room, and these 2 guys came up to me and said, we're from Rounder Records, and we want to talk to you about doing a CD compilation of a best of. And I had just sent Ken Irwin the postcard that very night, and I said, my God, that was fast. And they looked at each other and looked at me and said, what are you talking about? And I explained how I stuck the postcard in the mailbox across the street from the club right before I'd come in. So that was the first thing they did, and I was really, really glad. Well, then after that, then they, I got to working with this one guy, Steve Netsky, who was very interested in me. They both were, but he ended up working with me more, and he, said, well, are you writing songs? And I said, yeah, I have been writing. So after that, then it kind of all came together that I was able to do the Broken Promises CD. And then they've reissued all of my other stuff, all of the early recordings, and then the duet album's going to come out. So it kind of, came together that way, and I like I say, I'm hoping to record next year, do another recording. So it just takes time, I guess.
Did you have to go through any readjusting to the studio after being out of the studio for so long?
No, not really. Not really. It hadn't changed that much. I mean, now they recorded them. They don't have it on 2-inch tapes. It's DATs, or I don't know what they are. I don't know. This is why God made engineers. They deal with this. No, I didn't have any trouble. Not particularly.
You've always been comfortable with the studio environment?
Well, I was nervous in the studio 25 years ago or 20 years ago, but now I don't particularly get nervous, I think a lot of it is being prepared. I couldn't go in and not have the songs ready to go, the arrangements and the words and all that stuff. And I couldn't go in not, without having songs to record. I couldn't go in and say, well, we'll think of something in the studio. I couldn't do that. I mean, people do that. I can't, And the musicians I play with are, first rate, so that helps. It helps tremendously. Because when I go in, I usually just go in and record with me, the guitar and the bass, and then add everything from there. Sometimes the percussion at the same time.
Now, there has been a real surge of interest in singer-songwriters in recent years, and particularly women singer-songwriters. Do you have a theory on why that is?
Well, there's just more of them out there. I think, like I said, Joni Mitchell started that years ago, and then Joan Baez started writing some, Judy Collins a little bit, and those were the big names. Of course, Buffy St. Marie had been writing all along, and I think a lot of times she gets forgotten. I mean, she's a fairly prolific songwriter. I don't know. I think it's just because there's more of them now, more of them out doing it.
Mm-hmm. Any of the current crop that have caught your attention?
I like Katie Curtis.
Mm-hmm.
God, I'm trying to think. I always get asked this, and I can never remember who else I really like. I mean, I like a lot of them. A lot of them are wonderful. But I really like her. And I can't think of anybody. In terms of women songwriters, you're talking about?
Yeah, in particular, yeah.
Yeah, I think Katie Curtis. God, I'm sure as soon as I hang up, I'll think of somebody else that I just love, and I just can't think of any right now. But I don't know. There, a lot of times, I'll like a song here and I'll like a song there. I don't necessarily like everything someone does. And I'm sure people could say the same thing about me. I'm not saying that it's just the way it is. I mean, I just you like certain songs, and then there's others that maybe don't necessarily grab you, but it's just I keep listening because there's all kinds of people out there that are just wonderful.
What about the extent of your live work these days, Mary? You get out there much?
Not as much as I'd like to, like I said, because I don't have an agent right now. But I'm going to go up to the Northwest. I'm going to play in Oregon and Washington State here next month. No, I'm sorry, in October. And the Internet's kind of a nice thing. I get contacted online by people, and it's a great resource. But I usually go back east once a year or every other year, and I go to the Northwest usually every year. Now, usually I go after the first of the year. Since I'm doing this in October, it's real doubtful that I would go back up in this coming year. I like to travel in the cooler months. When it's real hot, I don't care to travel. Mm-hmm. But I just played a nice festival up in Vermont a few weeks ago now, 3 weeks ago. It was very nice. And the festivals are nice in the summertime because they're usually just over a weekend, and even if it's hot and sticky, someplace you can stand it. And you meet a lot of people, and you hear a lot of people, and they're wonderful. Yeah,
I imagine it'd be a great way to make contacts.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyway, I travel when I can.
Okay, Mary, look, I'll leave it at that. I want to thank you so much for your time.
Oh, I want to thank you for your interest in wanting to do this, and I hope we can meet. Do you ever get up to the States at all?
Can't say I do. It hasn't been in my budget, but I certainly hope to get there one day.
Yeah. Well, sometime maybe I'll get down there. It'd be real nice to have the chance to come down and play in Australia because I've always wanted to see it, and I know it's beautiful. So, maybe we'll meet face to face at some point. Then do you go back and go to bed, or do you stay up?
I'm up now, so I think I'll probably stay up.
Oh, yeah. Anyway. Well, is your show on once a week, or how often?
Once a week on Tuesday nights, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So I'll be back here again tonight.
Oh, my goodness. Well, try to rest. What else do you do? I mean, what kind of work do you do?